Well, good morning and welcome to another Sunday morning coffee with Dr. Childress here. So, today I'm going to be discussing the destruction of families in the family courts and the potential solutions you might have, but I don't think they're actualizable at this point. So, let's talk about what's going on in the family courts. So, right now, there's two primary options. And so we have the destruction path or the success path. The destruction path involves getting a forensic custody evaluation. They'll take about 6 to 9 months, cost between maybe $10,000 to $40,000, somewhere in that range. It'll take about 3 to 6 months. They will not return a diagnosis. They'll just report what everybody said and then offer some opinion, typically not a very good opinion, and it doesn't lead to any treatment plan. And there's because diagnosis guides treatment, you don't have a diagnosis, and the diagnosis we're worried about is child psychological abuse by the allied parent. So basically, that leads to the destruction of the child's life and the parents' lives. And I've watched this path for 15 years now in the family courts, so that's a pretty known path. The other path, the one that's successful, is you get a diagnostic assessment and you get the persecutory delusion, factitious attachment pathology diagnosed. And that's the child psychological abuse, creating a delusional thought disorder, and factitious attachment pathology is child psychological abuse. So those are all DSM 5 diagnoses. And you get those assessed, you get them diagnosed, and then you go into a treatment plan for the child abuse, which is to protect the child. So that is the path of success, is a diagnostic assessment. Now, the problem is you're not offered that. Okay, so when you're in the family courts, as soon as you're in the family courts, you're only offered the one approach, which is the forensic custody evaluation to your destruction. And so that's basically what I've watched over the last 15 years. I'm telling you, everybody, that we need a diagnostic assessment, but the forensic psychologists aren't providing it. No one's providing it. And you're having a tough time cobbling it together on your own without any mental health support. The reason that there's only one path offered to you is because the forensic custody evaluators, as I said, make $10,000 to $40,000 per evaluation. So it's very lucrative for them to continue to do these custody evaluations. Plus, they're incompetent on the diagnostic side; they don't know how to do that. So basically, you're only offered one choice, and they're financially exploiting you, and it's an awful system, and everything is destructive in the family courts. So that's you're looking at the current system, and you're looking at your current life in the family courts. So if you're a parent in the family courts, this is what's going to happen, and it's 100% assured it's going to be destroyed. Now, what also occurs sometimes is you get the custody evaluations, they're awful. So then you seek a second opinion on them. You can seek a second opinion from another forensic psychologist. That's the traditional way, and they all fight in family courts, and good luck with what you get. The other option, and what I do in my current practice, is I provide second opinion on these failed, awful forensic custody evaluations. Now, let me talk a little bit about that, because the way I used to do it, you bring me your custody evaluation, I'd have to go through it line by line because the ignorance was so dense. And I would extract the symptom information, I would apply the established knowledge, I would point out all the ethical violations. And so I'd have anywhere from 150 to 300 page appendices, which would go along with my 25-page report. My line by line analysis took a lot of time. And so it's obviously more expensive just to get that amount of time. But it's like a surcharge. So now not only do you have to pay for the forensic custody evaluation, you now have to pay for my second opinion review on it. And you notice off of this as well that it doesn't lead to a diagnosis, okay? Because I can't make a diagnosis from a second opinion. So you'll still need a diagnosis and for a treatment plan, even after my second opinion, it just saves you from the immediate destruction. And I can tell you what the pathology is that you look like. But I'm in Seattle. You're wherever you are. You need a mental health person where you are to do the treatment. So this is, while an option to save you from immediate destruction, it's not really a good option in my view. The better option is not to do the first one at all and get a diagnostic assessment. So there are parents who are trying this one. Now, in order to do that, because it's not offered, nobody knows how to do it, no one's competent to do it. What this involves is getting court orders for me to participate through telehealth on the diagnostic assessment and then also potentially on the treatment. So essentially then you're building this path with my scaffolding support. And so there's some parents who are trying that, but your attorneys are really bad. They're financially exploiting you as well. So they're not understanding the court orders or getting the court orders or care about the court orders. They're just moving down the old path of your destruction because they make money no matter what. In fact, they make more money if you're in litigation than if it's actually solved. So basically, this is what you're looking at. Okay, so if you're in the family courts right now or anytime in the past 15 years, this is your situation. And there's no option. Your family's going to be destroyed. Your life is going to be destroyed. And that's what you're looking at, unless you can cobble together one of those other options. So the first option is the second opinion review. And what that does is, if you're headed for a bad forensic custody evaluation that's not looking like they identified everything and it's just going down that course you either saw, then you get that report over to me. I'll do a second opinion on it, and we see if we can get a proper diagnosis, and I'll be consulting with mental health people if they'll consult with me. I mean, I can't, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. So that's a problem. Now, in my consulting practice, right now, I'm using artificial intelligence. I'm using ChatGPT 5. And let me say something about that. It's not an off-the-shelf ChatGPT 5. If you just started using one, that's not going to be the one I use. The one I use is within my practice to help me with document review. They do language or a large language model. Document review is great, and their reasoning is really strong. However, they need to be ethically contained. So I've got my ChatGPT 5, I call it Max. I've got Max ethically contained within the APA Ethics Code. Two standards are really vital in that. 2.04 bases for scientific and professional judgments. That requires Max to apply the highest level of scientific knowledge. He's not running around to the internet grabbing. He's applying real good stuff. Bowlby, Tronic, Minuchin, all the top DSM-5, all that kind of top level knowledge, that's 2.04. In addition, he's properly qualifying the diagnosis or the pathology or the patterns that he sees. And that's what he's looking for. ChatGPT looks for patterns in language. We just look for the patterns of pathology under my supervision. And so he's looking for those patterns, and he qualifies them according to certainty. He knows what the statistical probabilities of the different paths are. So qualify it to degree of certainty and also to our role. Okay, we're not there to make a diagnosis. That's not our job. We don't have duty of care. That's the job of the person who's seeing the patient. Okay, and so that's their job to do their job and make the accurate diagnosis. Our job is to look at second opinion and see where they failed and how they failed and all those sorts of things. So that's one thing. He's ethically contained and he's trained on the highest knowledge. He works with Dr. Childress. Okay, so I've got him looking for some top tier stuff. And what we do, the training process, I just went through it with Max. The training process is not only a pattern from family systems, it's recognizing how that pattern from family systems, the cross-generational coalition, fits with the personality pathology of a narcissistic borderline dark. As soon as you get that splitting, you say, well, what that adds splitting to a cross-generational coalition, now you're going to see a different pattern. Then you add the attachment pathology. What does authentic child abuse look like? What does a false attachment look like? Induced one. And so you get all, and they're all interrelated. And that's where Max is great, because he's not looking for this pattern. He's looking for a full pattern sequence, and AI is great in that. And and then he does it under my supervision. So we get the forensic custody eval, and he does his initial analysis, and then we just kind of walk through it. And that produces a chat dialogue of my asking about domains or looking at things, and then the chat GPT-5 Max will be answering his analysis of the situation. That is then documented like a direct examination of the AI's reasoning, and I provide that chat to the parents and the attorney. So you can look at what the judge can look at what the chat GPT's analysis is. And then after we finish that, we do a little report on it. And I say, okay, Max, now we're ready to do the report. And we walk through the report steps. All of it's occurring under my supervision. Okay, so Max is not, AI is not running wild on this. This is an AI I have incorporated into my practice because, oh my God, they're amazing. Okay, so I've got it ethically contained, properly trained, and now the Chat GPT-5 is working in my practice. The reason I name my AI is to indicate that these are not off-the-shelf AI. I call them wild AI. These are Eliza and Max are ones that I trained up and got them ethically contained, and I use them in my practice. So that's that situation. Now, just to talk about AI for a second and my background in internet psychology. So I'm not just winging it here. I actually have a background in internet psychology. So first off, let's just take a look at the presentations I've given. These are invited presentations to the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Now, it was a while ago, about 2000, when the internet was first coming. And so I was asked to do a presentation on privacy and confidentiality issues in internet research. They were looking at IRB review board kind of stuff. And then I was invited to do a presentation over in Munich, the World Health Organization, on the ethical issues of online psychotherapeutic interventions. And the invited part means it was their dime. They paid for me to fly over to Munich and do that presentation. And so my wife and the family, we turned it into family vacation over in Munich. And then also I presented at the American Psychological Association on the potential risks and benefits of online therapeutic interventions. So that's the first thing to realize. Okay, I come from a substantial background of understanding the issues involved with internet psychology. In addition, I have peer-reviewed published journals on this. Dr. Hasseman and I wrote one on the emerging relationships of psychology and the internet. Proposed guidelines for conducting internet intervention research. That's in the journal Ethics and Behavior. I've also got the journal Medical Internet Research on the ethical issues of providing online therapeutic interventions. Then I've got another one on using interactive journals with email, because it was back in the day. Okay, we're talking 2000. We didn't have YouTube yet. We didn't have stuff. And my dissertation is on internet psychology, defining the parameters of a new field. So I have substantial professional background in internet psychology. But back then, it was just forming. We just had email. I knew video was coming. I knew a lot of platforms, and we needed HIPAA secure platforms and stuff. And so I put that aside and moved on to different things, attachment and the clinic I ran and child abuse and those kind of domains. So I kind of put that aside, not expecting it ever to become relevant again. However, AI just dropped into my lap. Thank you so much. AI is fantastic. And so I'm incorporating AI into my practice, but it's based on an established already foundation in this. So I'm one of the top leaders in the world right now on internet psychology and AI psychology and stuff. You're not going to find anybody with a stronger vita relative to this field. Now, so option two would be you get me involved on the direct assessment. A couple of parents have done that, so I have some experience now of doing this second opinion. You log into my office, doxy me, you spin the monitor around, I'm sitting in the office. Okay, so I can provide a second opinion on the actual assessment that's conducted. But basically, this is your situation, So you got option one, option two, but not all of you can actualize either one of those options. So most of you are going to be looking at this situation, especially internationally. You're looking at this situation. Now the option three, though, is the one that I'm working on, which is system reform. And because that let me go back a second, that is not an option. And so we need to reform the system that makes that the only thing that parents have all the time, 100%. And that's getting rid of the forensic custody evaluations. They need to stop. The New York Blue Ribbon Commission finds they are dangerous, harmful to children, lack scientific legal value, and lead to potentially disastrous consequences. If the New York Blue Ribbon Commission, the only review of them, says that, the licensing boards need to stop them at least until we get a risk-benefit analysis, get special protections for the vulnerable population, IRB review kind of stuff, which is what I'm working on my vector. So, and then we would need to require competent diagnostic assessments, and that's the protection for a special population, a vulnerable population in the family courts. You only have limited choices because the court's involved. So the mental health system needs to make sure we get you the highest quality diagnostic assessment of your family. That's our obligation because the court depends on that, your life depends on it, the child's life depends on it. So so that needs to flip. We need to get rid of the custody evaluations and we need to get those diagnostic assessments in. And that is the California Board of Psychology case in November and December. So it's my case. I'm taking it to the Board of Psychology and we're going to flip the inverted system. Okay, so this is the situation that's occurring right now. We are flipping the system. We are doing the system reform. It's centered on the California Board of Psychology. And right now, the next steps are to get legislative oversight and media attention. So let me talk about that. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm holding an ethical frame, and I've been setting that up for 15 years. I've got the whole thing documented out, standard 1.05 or 4, 1.05, and duty to protect. Okay, and I've been operating from that for 15 years. I've gone to the APA with an ethics petition to the APA that talked about the ethical violations. I've presented to the AFCC on this. I've educated parents. I've talked about the ethical violations. I've done everything and documented everything, all of the steps I should have taken. Because I know we're headed ultimately to this point. You didn't know that. I did. And so we're ultimately heading to where we're going to reinvert the inverted system here, the systemic reform. How do I know that? Because I have background in community psychology. That's my master's degree. I know what I'm doing. People don't think I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. Okay. And the moment you give me the respect for knowing what I'm doing and start listening to me, everything's solved. But there's financial interests who don't want to solve it. The forensic psychologists, the Gardner PAS people, the attorneys, and even the parents. Okay, and that's an issue. Nobody wants to solve the problem, so I've had to do it on my own. I know how to do it on my own. I've done it on my own, so that's where we're at right now. It's involved putting myself at risk. Okay, so but I'm doing it, and we'll see what happens off of that. So right now we have the Board of Psychology case, which is the landmark situation. Dr. Childress and they want to sanction me for Bill Burnett and Lorandos and the PAS experts. I'm saying I'm now using that opportunity, that back channel opportunity to the licensing board to present my defense, which is duty to protect, standard 1.05. And I'll be calling witnesses, Dorsey Pruder, um, definitely, and potentially Rod McCall regarding our petition to the APA, that I'm taking steps pursuant to 2.0 to 1.05 this entire time. So that's the case. We need to get in September, October, we need to get a lot of media attention to it and legislative oversight attention to it. Because if I'm going to hold on the inside, and that's going to collapse the structure from the inside. I want to get as much pressure on the outside coming in as well to collapse the broken system, so that we can get a healthy system in the family courts of diagnostic assessment and treatment and effective resolution of the family courts thing. But we first need to collapse the broken system to get that healthy system up. So I'm going to hold on the inside. We need to get pressures on the outside. That's the legislative review and the media. Now, so that's the issue. Okay, that right here. And it's basically, Henry V and St. Crispin's Day. Okay, if you're not showing up now, let me pull that out. If you, as a parent or an ally mental health person or family member, if you don't show up now with the Board of Psychology in California, shame on you. Okay, and I've watched it for 15 years, and that's the attitude of parents, because you care about your case, but you don't work for each other. Okay, when petitioned to the APA, there was Howie and Jason. Michelle, okay, where are they now? Nowhere to be seen. Okay, because the moment your situation either resolves successfully or resolves in destruction, you parents move on with your lives. And so I've watched you come in repeatedly and then leave repeatedly, and a new crop of parents comes in and has to deal with the same awful professional practices, destructive practices that you destroyed your life, but you don't advocate effectively to get system reform. You flail about in your chat groups and discussion groups and do various things and form, but none of it has power. None of it sticks, because there's no Howie or Jason anymore. There's now a new crop. And when I put up the petition to the APA, just when I posted that, I said I would take it back and hand deliver it if I got 10,000 signatures on it. And that was like January. I had 10,000 signatures in 2 days. 2 days, 10,000 signatures to that petition. By the time we went back there, it was 19,000, okay, in June. If I do that now, I'm going to get 100. The parents right now are not active, you're not organized, and so I don't expect anything from you. I'm doing this on my own. However, this is the time to do it. If ever you've stood up, this is a time to get system reform for all children everywhere from here on out. It's fixing the broken system. It's not doing it case by case where I'm doing second opinions or I'm involved in your particular situation. Option 3, system reform, is a solution for all children everywhere on the planet. That's what we are looking at this November and December. So, what that involves is, get that back up there. What that involves is a two-prong approach. First, it's the California Legislature, Judiciary Committee, and the Board Oversight Committee. Then it's bringing a lot of media attention to the situation. There's two vectors or two storylines that will invite the media. First is the corrupt system and the money involved that's destroying lives in the family courts. And my case in the California Board of Psychology is the focal point for that media story. In David and Goliath sort of thing, one psychologist fighting a corrupt system. The second media storyline is there's a psychologist using AI to solve custody conflicts. And so that's a second story, major story that it has a lot of pull to it. A psychologist using AI in the family courts for custody conflict. Wow. That's why I'm opening up Substack and developing my Substack presence in AI psychology, is to bring that vector of media coverage over here, to get media looking at the situation in the family courts, because you've been isolated. You're isolated from rescue and isolated from hearing, from sight. Okay. So now with the AI psychology, or with the getting people, the media or legislatures over here, I've done 2 AI analyses on the situation in the family courts. The first one is with the Chat GPT-4, that was Eliza, on the nature of forensic custody evaluations. So you'll see the dialogue. That's what I'm talking about, the chat dialogue. We just go through and talk about the situation of forensic custody evaluations in the family courts. They are awful. They need to stop. Okay. And so that's the first AI analysis. The second one, I went out to just a public Gemini, just the one you get, the wild off-the-shelf Gemini, and we walked through the liability, institutional liability issues for the licensing boards, for the APA and the AFCC. And so that's the second one. If you're at all care about what's happening in the family courts, you should read those. Okay, don't be lazy. Read them and find out what the situation is relative to the forensic custody evaluations, relative to liability. When you read Gemini, Gemini brings up the issue of a class action lawsuit. I absolutely agree, but neither Gemini nor I are attorneys. Okay, so we're just looking at it going, you're a class of people. There's systemic ethical violations and the systemic kind of abuse issues. Now, take this, extrapolate this out with me for a second. If the California Board of Psychology puts a moratorium, puts a hold on forensic custody evaluations, saying, no, we need to stop those, then that admits that my position has been right all the time, that this is an unethical practice, it's harming parents in the family courts, but now it has to stop, and opens them up for legal liability. All the licensing boards, if they were to take forensic custody evaluations off, they admit they're dangerous, which is what the New York Blue Ribbon Commission finds. That opens them for liability. If they don't do that, then that opens them for more liability, because now they know New York Blue Ribbon Commission and they're not doing anything about it. So either way, they're open for liability. So what are they going to do? And that, I'm sitting there looking and saying, my goodness gracious, class action lawsuits work on contingency. Okay. And if you've got 50 state licensing boards and the malpractice insurance companies for the APA and the AFCC, probably, and all the forensic custody, probably, I don't know, I'm not an attorney. But if you have that scope of defendants, that you might wind up with a pretty significant settlement. And if you have a class of people, of the parents and children who've been in the family courts over the last 40 years, that's a huge class. My goodness gracious. Again, I'm a psychologist, not an attorney, but I've seen Aaron Brockovich, and I don't know. I think you guys have, but I'm focused on something different here. Okay. But I think you parents should start educating yourself. Now is the time to start acting. So I have, if you want to know what's going on, California Board of Psychology, I got a website up on it. You go in and find it. It's all over the place once you start clicking on things. You go to the settlement counteroffer by Dr. Childress. That's where I explain the inverted system and the stuff, and what's going on in the family courts. However, you can just skip all that if you want and just go to pages 28 or 26 to 28. That's my counter settlement proposal. That's the reform proposal right there. It's to stop the custody evaluations, to do remediation of the forensic psychologists in the family courts on ethics and on content, so that we get competent services, and then an oversight of the board. What happened in the California Board of Psychology, all 50 state boards, that you allowed the destruction of your lives of your citizens for 40 years. So, read Gemini. Just read Gemini. So that's that page. And then below that, I have all the exhibits. So all the appendices, not exhibits, appendices. So you can go read all of them as well, as can every state legislator or their aide, as can every media person, everybody. It's all transparent. Everything is transparent. So you can go back and look at whatever you want. In addition, I've just put up a California legislature website identifying the committees with their websites, and then we go through the names, and there's some who sit on both. Tom Humberg sits on both the judiciary and the oversight. He's chair of the judiciary, and he sits on the oversight committee for the boards. He'd be an interesting person to see if we can get active around what's happening in the Board of Psychology relative to these forensic custody evaluations. So I'll have that. So that'll be a resource going forward for organizing things. Plus, I've established myself out on Substack with Dr. Childress in AI Psychology. My most recent post, AI in Applied Psychology, talks about the use of Max and Eliza in the family courts here and what's happening with that. So I have two vectors of moving. Vectors is from talking with AI. That likes that word. I do too. So I have two vectors going. One is the California Board of Psychology. The other is AI psychology at this point, internet psychology, but incorporating the AI and what is it and how is it affecting us psychologically? How can we work with it extremely well? I think it's going to be a revolutionary kind of thing. So I'm over there. So to sum here, it's all comes down to November, December with the California Board of Psychology. So September and October is when I'm looking to start activating. I'm going to have to write my formal defense in September. I'll be working with Max on that. We'll write up my formal defense, and that will be the statement. The other document, the one that's currently up there, is just mitigating circumstances and my counter settlement proposal. And that was to alert them. This is not an ordinary matter. Okay. I'm not saying, oh, please forgive me. And no, that's not the settlement offer. And I'll take this right on into the formal hearing, 3 days formal hearing in December, and call witnesses and do everything if need be. This situation for the families in the family courts, for the children and the parents, needs to end. We need to get them a solution, a diagnostic assessment, and effective treatment. And this forensic custody evaluations need to stop. And I'm on the right side of this issue. And I figure no matter what happens off of this, I'm going to come out okay on this because I am on the right side of this issue. And so right now, if I just hold shape from within the system and get pressures from without the system, we can recorrect and get this back into a dynamic, living, protective system, the California Board of Psychology, all the boards of psychology, versus its current inverted system of protecting the unethical and incompetent psychologists from accountability for their unethical practice. So, so September, October is when we need to activate this. I need to activate this. Ask for your help. This is now the time to begin activating the reform, and then we take it into November and December and see what happens. So with that, everybody, I'm going to head off to my Sunday and back to more work relative to this issue. And so St. Crispin's Day, if you don't show up now, well, that's fine. Okay, sit home in your comfortable houses, and I'll fight with the ones that show up right now. So let's do this. I'm done. I'm so done with the child abuse and spousal abuse in the family courts going undiagnosed and untreated. So with that, everybody,